Are the new bypass tubes from MTS Offroad the holy grail of UTV suspension for your Razor Pro R? I think it could be. Let's chat about it. All right, here we go. Here's another paid shill that gets free products to make a video to tell you about how good something is that you don't even need. Not really. For full transparency of this video, I do work with MTS Offroad. They do give me a discount on their products they offer. Vice versa, I do the same for them. They run my products on their vehicles. But this is an honest review, guys. I'm pretty stoked on this product. This is a suspension upgrade from MTS Offroad. This is a next level above your standard respring and revalving that most of you guys have probably done if you have upgraded your suspension on your side-by-side. But this is a big step up in performance. And if you guys have followed me for a while, you know I'm a suspension geek. I'm all about spending money on having a car that handles and performs really well. And I think that really boils down to suspension. So let's get into my thoughts. So if you want to learn more about my background, you can check the YouTube channel. Made dozens of videos about suspension on all different types of side-by-sides and gone down the rabbit hole with each one to try to optimize suspension performance. I work with a variety of suspension tuners. And more importantly, before I made this video, I took my 2025 Razor Pro R to 3 distinct environments to get some real miles, including Baja, Lake Havasu, and the Glamis Sand Dunes, before I created this video, just to give you guys more of an idea of how it feels in different environments and why I think this upgrade is worth you considering and probably spending your hard-earned money on. So let's get into it. Starting off, Razor Pro R, you have 2 options. You go with the base model, which is Walker Evans suspension, or you spend the extra money and you get the Fox DV live valve setup, along with some other bells and whistles. In short, it's worth it to spend the money to upgrade. The live valve suspension sets you up with 4 suspension modes. So stock out of the box, you've got Baja mode, track mode, rock crawl mode, and comfort mode. Now, what they're trying to do is have a suspension system that uses a lot of sensors based on how you steer, you brake, you turn, accelerate, to have the car feel great in any condition. And as you guys know, when you drive these things in multiple environments at multiple speeds, you will see generally every suspended off-road vehicle has some shortcomings. So this is how they're trying to combat it and make a one-size-fits-all. And from the factory, it's not bad. The things that I don't like about it from the factory are an overall dead feeling. I prefer something that gives me a lot of feel. I don't want to call it feedback because steering feedback is different. I'm talking about feeling the terrain, so then it enables me to understand how hard, how aggressive I can drive through big bumps, around turns, G-outs. I think you need to have a feel. And me being a 2-wheel guy, it's all about that front end feel. If you know what I'm talking about, if you're a biker, if you're a dirt bike rider, how hard you can corner. You gotta have that connectedness to the terrain, and that enables you to read and feel the terrain and really get you to the next level of speed and aggression. So that's something that was missing. Another thing, me owning a 4-seat Pro R, it's so long, it had a bit of a boat feeling, particularly with the long trailing arms. I'd noticed this in big roller situations, and it's something that might necessarily slow me down, but it's a characteristic I don't like because I've been in other side-by-sides like my previous car, the Speed UTV, which didn't have that feeling and sensation. So it's something that is exacerbated by the size of the vehicle, and it's something that I was hoping to be mitigated. And then also too, when you drive this thing in multiple environments, it works pretty good, but when you go to the dunes, you guys know what I'm talking about. The suspension is really put to its limit. It bottoms out as you start to drive fast, big G out uphills, downhills. You're trying to rip through the dunes, hold a good pace, you're leading your buddy's ride, you're hanging with some fast guys. That is where you find the shortcoming of the suspension. And Polaris did something to try to combat this with the red button on the steering wheel that stiffens the compression all the way up for 3 seconds to allow you to hammer through those G-outs and keep your momentum going. And honestly, it's a pretty darn good system. As a whole, for stock, it's a great platform to build off of, but it could be even better and it could be great. So let me explain to you what we did to go from average to fantastic. So after driving the vehicle stock for a little bit, I sent it to MTS and they revalved and resprung the shocks. Now, I put about 1,100 miles on it at that point, multiple trips in the sand dunes, hard pack, Mexico, Arizona, 450-mile Arizona Peace Trail type ride, and got a good feel for how it was. It was a big improvement. First off, with the small bump compliance, it was more comfortable, slower speed, rough chatter. It was better in the mid-stroke, and it had better bottoming resistance than stock. I did notice when I was in the dunes, driving hard as you're able to drive the Pro R, thanks to the torque and how tough the car is. I've been driving this UTV harder in the dunes than any UTV I've ever owned by a noticeable margin, but I ended up on the red button for the bottom out control and the harsh G outs. As I'm duning faster, I'm carrying a lot more momentum. So keeping your momentum on those tight uphills, fast downhill G outs, hanging with your buddies, leading your buddies, you need that ability to get through those situations and carry some momentum. And the red button is something that worked nice. So like I said, to get one setup that works well for everything is almost impossible. And this is where the bypass tubes come in, because the guys at MTS have been working on these new internals for a while out there. And what it has been able to do is allow what is most desired in most all situations. So increase small bump compliance over the chatter, the small bumps, nice mid-stroke support that is giving you that feel of the terrain and isn't too dead and stiff like the stock suspension. And then of course ramping up, meaning getting stiffer towards the end of the travel as you're driving aggressive, as you're coming to a big G out or a bottom out event, and preventing bottoming. And that's gotta be tricky for those guys to figure out, because you've got the electronics trying to assist you from your inputs of the steering wheel, braking, turning. So that's why I thought stock had a bit of a dead feel, because it's almost too smart for its own good, and it took away the feel, the connectedness to the terrain that I love and that I've experienced on other side-by-sides that I was hoping to regain. So stock setup was good, and then not only did they install the bypass cans, but they also reduced my spring rate in the rear. So the back end of the car being so long, there's one characteristic of the Pro R I didn't necessarily love, which was it felt like not so much that it kicks, but it just didn't feel settled. I think the combination of the geometry and the stiffness of the rear, you're being so close to the front of the car that it's just not settled and you're not in the middle of it like some other vehicles. That was something that I didn't like. So the team at MTS realized with how long the Pro R is, how long the Mavar is, reducing the rear spring rate a little takes a little bit of load off of the front end of the vehicle, keeps the car more balanced, and you still don't really notice much of the rear G-out events as they've fine-tuned that with the electronics that come stock thanks to the live valve, along with the new bypass cans. So not only did they install the bypass cans, they did the reduced spring rate. First environment, I took it to Baja, 180 miles from Mexicali through the famous Zoo Road to San Felipe. It was a big improvement. I could tell from the parking lot. It was small bump compliance was more plush. The car had a little bit more sway to it, which is what I like because very quickly you get into the sway bar as well as the electronics helping you keep the car settled. But there's a balance of that I was really searching for and hoping to obtain with, again, what does the terrain feel like? How am I getting that feeling from the terrain? And how am I staying stable? So 180 miles, we went through a variety of conditions, but the big whoops, the steeper, I'd call them like motocross style whoops, the higher shaft speed events, it felt great. That is race course rougher and faster than what I would normally drive most of the time. My only critique after leaving there was maybe to lift up the front of the car a little bit and potentially lower the crossover ring just for a little bit more front end bottoming resistance in relation to the rear. But I wanted to drive it some more and see if that was just kind of a one-time thing because of that environment being a little bit different and new to me in terms of how rough it was. It's rougher than any other spot I've been in Baja. So that was my takeaway after the 180 miles. Speaking of rough, next ride was in Lake Havasu. We only rode about 55 miles with the gang over at Anderson Power Sports. We're in town for an event, and it is a different type of rough. You guys that ride Havasu a lot know what I'm talking about. It's a lot of sharp, small rocks. The trails are narrow because they've all been built by UTVs and ATVs. It's got a different feel than most places, but with the dry winter and with all of you guys that love off-roading out there like me, it gets a ton of traffic. And this is where I really realized that the bypass tubes help the track mode work a lot better. That's something that I didn't use much before because I needed the bottoming resistance. I ended up driving in the Baja mode a lot, but I liked the track mode because it reduced some of the compression. I didn't have any big G out or bottom out experiences there in Havasu. And when I was going, 30 miles or less, I could pump it down into comfort mode because you guys know that right at Havasu, those washes are chatterboard central. So it too chatterboard to run the comfort mode above 35 miles an hour in my opinion, but I like track. And that's a nice benefit of these bypass tubes is I think it makes each of the 4 modes better at their respective terms, just because it's allowing the suspension to work in a more fluid, more natural, non-live valve feel is how I would describe it. So was really stoked on how the car performed out there. And then had to throw my paddle tires on and head out to Glamis because, of course, this is where we need the bottom out resistance. This is, as you guys know, it's so much different. It's so much harder to have a vehicle work well out there without going to a stiffer spring rate and rechanging everything. You know, maybe if you owned a sand car and you only took it to Glamis, of course, you just tune it for that. But with a UTV, if you're like me, you like going all over the place and you want to have this mythical holy grail car that works well everywhere. So fast forward, throw my paddles on, get out to the dunes, and I was incredibly impressed how much more bottoming resistance I could feel and how much less I was using the red button. I was using the red button, you know, 1 time for every 5 or 6 times I would have used it in the past. So that just goes to show the bottoming resistance, the way they were able to get the suspension to ramp up naturally. I would even try running it in track mode for some just to see how good it worked. Whereas I still preferred Baja for the dunes for the additional compression. You know, the live valve does stiffen up to 10 if you get a little bit of air time, it senses that. And I still had the red button there when I needed it if I came into something a little bit too hot, or, you know, my most recent dune trip was extra soft with some deeper witch's eyes than normal. So you guys know how it is if you're out in Glamis. You never know what's over the next crest, or you come into something a little bit more hot and something ends up being a little bit spicier than you anticipate. That's what the red button, I think, is designed for. So as a whole, just to be brief and not labor on about this for 20 minutes, the bypass cans worked well in all 3 of those environments. I think where we're at with ride height is good. I mentioned maybe raising the front, which I think I might still do. And I think the Pro R, just like pretty much all UTVs I've owned, it makes sense to have the front end riding about a 1/2 inch higher than the rear. All of you guys have different setups like me. You know, I'm running my full-size spare when I'm on the hard pack. I'm taking it off in the sand. I only have 2 kids that are pretty lightweight, so I want to set the car up basically for 2 adults. And with the spring rate changes that they made, the bypass cans are really delivering and come up with a setup that I'm very happy with, basically in all conditions. So I'll post a link below if you guys want to learn more from MTS. It's an awesome upgrade. It's a next level. They have their own can. I think some of their competitors will take the stock can and try to drill it out, but I think what they've achieved here is special. It's cool to see. You know, I know they've been working for a while. They've tuned, you know, probably at this point thousands of cars out in the sand. They're out there all the time, along with other customers' cars with different needs and conditions. And it's almost impossible to make everybody happy, I'm sure. But, you know, to go back to my bold claim at the start of this video off, does this car, is it the pretty much ultimate in all conditions? I haven't found a better setup of owning a side-by-side. I think you need the live valve to achieve it, just without the variances of what your needs are in those environments. And the bypass just added a level, that bypass cans added a level of plushness and feel that is really something I enjoy on a non-live valve car. So I think both worlds came together nicely. Guys, I'm being honest here. I really think this is a product you should consider if you're looking for the ultimate in suspension performance for a Razor Pro R. So let me know what you think. Comment below any other companies you might have used or upgrades you've done, or if you're chasing this type of feeling, or if you've had some similarities or differences. Let's have a little chat in the comments. But hope you guys like the content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.